My name is Julia Vance. I'm 41 years old, and I'm writing this from a beige extended stay hotel room that smells faintly of bleach and burnt coffee. It's been 3 days since I walked out of my marriage, and the silence here hums louder than any argument we ever had. I hadn't planned to leave that day. I thought the therapy session would be another slow attempt to patch what was left, but Aaron had other plans. We sat on that expensive couch that never felt comfortable, the one facing the wall of framed degrees. Dr. Reeves, calm, patient, infuriatingly neutral, asked him what he felt was wrong between us. Aaron drew in a trembling breath, his eyes glistening just enough. "It's Julia," he said softly. "Her anger. I'm honestly scared of her." The room went still. Even the clock seemed to hold its breath. Dr. Reeves's pen froze mid-note. Her eyes flicked to me, waiting for my reaction. I could have laughed or screamed, or reminded them both that I was the one who had to patch up walls, who learned how to duck when glass shattered. I could have listed the nights he came home drunk and slammed drawers, the mornings he apologized, with roses and tears that always looked rehearsed. But I didn't. I just nodded. I understand. For the first time in a long while, Aaron looked startled. That wasn't in his script. His brows twitched, his lips parted as if he'd lost his place. Dr. Reeves tilted her head. "Julia, you understand." "Yes," I said evenly. "He's scared. I get it." We sat there for 20 more silent minutes. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I let him fill the void with his own discomfort. When the session ended, the air between us felt wrong, too quiet, too balanced. Aaron didn't look at me as we walked to the car. The drive home was wordless. I watched the city blur by through the window, the reflection of my own face against streaks of rain. There was a calm clarity in me, the kind you feel when the last thread finally snaps. Inside the house, he went straight to the kitchen, poured himself a large glass of red wine, and waited. I could feel his eyes on me, expecting a reaction. Instead, I walked to the bedroom, pulled down the old duffel bag from the closet shelf, folded 3 changes of work clothes, my laptop toiletries. The sound of the zipper echoed like a door locking behind me. He appeared in the doorway, wine glass trembling slightly. "What are you doing?" "You said you're scared of me," I said, not looking up. "So I'm leaving. You shouldn't have to live in fear." He blinked confused. "Leaving as in a drive?" "No, leaving as in leaving." He laughed once, sharp and nervous. "Julia, don't be ridiculous." But I walked past him, keys in hand, duffel on my shoulder. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," I said quietly. I didn't slam the door, I just closed it behind me. The air outside was cold, honest. I drove without music, without thought, to the nearest extended stay hotel, checked in under my own name. The receptionist gave me a key card and a polite smile that felt like mercy. That night, I opened my laptop and searched for divorce attorneys. I found one, Melanie Bishop, known for handling high-conflict personalities. The description made me exhale something that might have been a laugh. By morning, I was in her office. She listened as I told her everything, the sessions, the outbursts, the glass, the performance. When I finished, she leaned back, eyes sharp. "He's building a case. You did the right thing by staying quiet." I frowned. "So what happens now?" "Now," she said, sliding a form toward me, "we file. Not for abuse, not for fault. Keep it clean. Irreconcilable differences. The less emotion on record, the better." I signed. By noon, Melanie had arranged for the papers to be served at the house. I asked her to handle it, no drama, no contact. At 3 o'clock, my phone buzzed a notification from the hotel front desk. The process server had been by. Aaron had been served. The first call came 10 minutes later, then another, then dozens. I didn't answer. Text after text lit up the screen. "You can't be serious. You're divorcing me. After one session, you're proving my point. You're unstable. Come home, Julia. Please. You're scaring me." That last one made me pause. "You're scaring me." He'd said it in therapy as a weapon. Now he said it out of panic. I typed a single message, the one Melanie approved. "All future communication must go through my lawyer, Melanie Bishop. Her contact information is in the documents you were served." Then I blocked his number. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, the hum of the mini fridge filling the silence. My hands trembled not from fear, but from the absence of it. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel dangerous. I wasn't scared anymore. It's been 3 weeks since I left. The beige hotel walls are starting to feel like an odd sort of safety, sterile, impersonal, free of memories. I still wake up at 5:30 every morning out of habit, expecting the sound of Aaron's coffee grinder or the hiss of his frustration when he couldn't find his tie. But the silence that follows is healing. The first few days I lived like a ghost, work, shower, stare at the television without hearing it. Then the text started. Dozens at first, then hundreds. He oscillated between begging and blaming. You've overreacted. This is crazy. You're crazy. Please come home, Julia. I can't sleep. I'll tell everyone what you did. It was like reading the script of a man arguing with himself. Melanie warned me not to answer anything. Don't feed the narrative, she said. He'll twist your words. So I stayed silent, which infuriated him even more. A week later, she called. Her voice was crisp, businesslike. Julia, he's filed a motion for a temporary restraining order. I froze. He what? Filed an ex parte request, she explained. Claims you're emotionally unstable and he fears for his safety. The hearing's in 10 days. I laughed, but it came out hollow. He's scared of me, again. He's manipulating the system, she said. They usually grant a temporary order automatically. Don't panic, we'll handle it. But I did panic. For the first time since leaving, real fear threaded back into me, not of him, but of what he could make others believe. The next few days blurred into paperwork, evidence gathering, late-night conversations with Melanie. She asked if I had anything that showed his volatility. I did. Photos. One of a hole in the drywall hidden behind a painting in the master bathroom. One of the antique radio my father had left me, its wooden case shattered across the floor. Receipts for repairs, timestamps, texts of him apologizing. Always the same words. I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me. Melanie listened quietly as I scrolled through each image. You were documenting, she said softly. I was surviving, I replied. That weekend, Aaron's sister, Letitia, started calling my mother. My mother is 70, retired, gentle, but unyielding. She answered the phone one evening while I was visiting her to drop off groceries. I heard Letitia's voice from across the room, high-pitched, trembling with false outrage. Your daughter is a monster, she spat. She threw Aaron out. He's sleeping on a couch. He has nothing. She cut him off. My mother's face didn't change. She listened patient, as always. Then she said, Letitia, my daughter, left her own home to keep your brother safe from his temper. I suggest you stop calling this number. And she hung up. But I saw the tremor in her hands as she put the phone down. They're going after anyone who will listen, she murmured. That night I sat alone in the hotel again, staring at the ceiling, realizing how easily stories can be rewritten, how a quiet woman can be turned into a villain, simply because she stopped playing her part. I opened my laptop and reread the documents. Vance v. Vance. The case file already looked like something out of a stranger's life. He'd claimed I'd been emotionally coercive, that I withheld affection, that my passive-aggressive behavior created an unsafe domestic environment. Melanie's words echoed in my head. He's setting the stage. We'll respond with evidence, not emotion. I nodded, even though she wasn't there. Emotion was what he thrived on. Evidence was what would ruin him. The morning of the hearing loomed closer with every sleepless night. I started running in the hotel gym at dawn, pounding the treadmill until my chest ached, until I could almost believe I was strong again. One evening, I found myself parked outside our old house. The curtains were drawn, but the faint light inside showed Aaron pacing with a phone pressed to his ear. His silhouette looked smaller somehow, the posture hunched. For a second, I pitied him. Then I remembered how many times I'd begged him to stop yelling, how many nights I'd cried into the pillow while he slept beside me, as if nothing had happened. I drove away before he could see me. The next morning, Melanie sent a short message. Be ready. Court's in 2 days. Bring everything. Everything. That meant every photo, every receipt, every painful memory in digital form. That night, as I sat cross-legged on the hotel bed organizing files, my laptop cast a pale light across the sheets. I stared at a photo of the broken radio again, the old 1940s model my father restored when I was a child. Aaron had swept it off my desk during an argument about dinner reservations. He had cried afterward, swore he'd buy a new one. But he never did. I did, and I fixed it myself. That was the night I realized I'd already been living without him long before I left. The next morning, as the sun bled through the thin curtains, I whispered to myself, he can't rewrite me. Not this time. The hearing was coming. The world would finally hear both sides. The morning of the hearing, I stood in front of the mirror of my hotel bathroom, trying to smooth my nerves, the way I smoothed the creases from my suit. My hands shook anyway. I had chosen the same navy suit I wore when I got promoted 5 years ago, the one that made me feel competent, grounded, untouchable. It didn't quite work. Melanie met me outside the courthouse steps. Her posture was crisp, her voice low but steady. Remember Julia, say only what's asked. Let him talk. The truth has a way of revealing itself when liars over-explain. I nodded, clutching my folder like armor. Inside, the courtroom smelled faintly of paper polish and tension. Aaron was already there, sitting at the opposite table. He looked smaller than I remembered, paler, with that same performance-ready fragility that had fooled so many people before. He wore a gray suit that made him look intentionally subdued, harmless. But his eyes, those eyes that once glowed with warmth, were cold calculation. He didn't look at me. The judge, a woman in her 60s with a calm, unreadable face, called the hearing to order. Aaron's lawyer stood first, a slick man with 2 white teeth and 2 polished shoes. Your Honor, my client has lived under emotional distress for years. He began, his tone rehearsed. Mrs. Vance has displayed controlling, unpredictable, and aggressive behaviors that have left my client fearing for his safety. I felt my stomach tighten. I didn't look at Aaron, but I could feel his gaze waiting for me to flinch, to break character. His lawyer continued. Dr. Reeves's notes confirmed that Mr. Vance expressed fear during therapy. The next day, Mrs. Vance fled their home and immediately filed for divorce, a textbook pattern of avoidance from accountability. He ended with a theatrical sigh. We request that the temporary restraining order be made permanent, granting Mr. Vance exclusive use of the marital home. The judge nodded slowly. Thank you. Ms. Bishop. Melanie stood adjusting her glasses. The quiet confidence in her voice felt like oxygen. Your Honor. She began. My client did not flee. She de-escalated. Mr. Vance declared in therapy that he was afraid of her. Believing him, Mrs. Vance immediately left to ensure his comfort and safety. Aaron shifted uncomfortably. Since then, Melanie continued. Mr. Vance has retaliated, filing false claims, contacting her repeatedly, despite clear boundaries, and attempting to distort reality through emotional manipulation. She walked to the table and placed a thick binder on it with a heavy thud. Exhibit A. The judge gestured. Proceed. Melanie opened the binder. Photo: 1 hole in the master bathroom wall caused by a full can of hairspray thrown during an argument. She flipped the page. Repair receipt dated January 8th. Photo 2. The shattered remains of a 1940s antique radio, Mrs. Vance's late father's, damaged after Mr. Vance swept it off her desk in anger. Receipt for repair attached. Aaron's lawyer rose. Objection, Your Honor. No proof. My client caused. Overruled, the judge said evenly. Continue, Ms. Bishop. Melanie turned the next page. Exhibit C, screenshots of messages from Mr. Vance to my client. She began to read, I'm sorry I broke it. I just saw red. Another, I'm sorry I screamed at your mother. She was pushing my buttons. Another still, I'm sorry I threw the mug. I'll clean it up. The courtroom was silent, except for the turning of pages. Then she reached into a small folder, and finally Exhibit D, a 30-second audio file. She played it. Static, the sound of breaking glass, a low, weary voice mine, saying, Aaron, please stop. I'm just going to go for a drive. We can talk when you're calm. Then a door shutting. When the recording stopped, the silence was so complete I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Aaron's lawyer muttered something under his breath, but it was Aaron who broke first. He slammed his hand on the table. She's twisting everything, he barked, standing up. She provoked me. She knows how to push me. She's cold and withholding, and she drives me to it. Mr. Vance, the judge snapped. Sit down. But he didn't. He pointed at me, voice rising. This is proof of her manipulation. She records me. She stalks me. I'm the one who's scared. Melanie didn't move. She just looked at the judge, expression unreadable. Aaron's lawyer tugged his sleeve, whispering urgently, but Aaron's face was bright red, his voice trembling. She's making me look like a monster. The judge banged her gavel. Enough. The echo cracked through the room. Aaron froze. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Vance, your behavior in this courtroom mirrors the very evidence we've been presented with. Her tone was sharp, measured. You accuse your wife of anger issues, yet it is you who are shouting, interrupting, and displaying aggression. Sit down. He sank back into his chair, face blank with something like panic. The judge turned her gaze to me. Mrs. Vance, your response. I stood my legs feeling like glass. Your Honor, I said quietly, I didn't come here to destroy him. I came here to stop being destroyed. She watched me for a long moment before nodding. When she spoke, her tone was final. The court denies Mr. Vance's request for a restraining order. Based on the evidence and his conduct here today, I am instead ordering Mr. Vance to enroll in a 24-week anger management program. Proof of enrollment within 48 hours, proof of completion at the end. Failure to comply will result in sanctions during the divorce proceedings. She struck her gavel once more. We are adjourned. Aaron's lawyer looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. Aaron just stared at me. His face drained, his eyes wide, like a man who had just realized he'd pulled the pin on his own grenade. Melanie placed a hand on my shoulder as we left the courtroom. You did well, she murmured. I nodded, though I barely heard her. Outside, the air hit me like a wave, bright, sharp, almost cleansing. For months, I'd lived under the weight of his accusations, his dramatics, his control. And now, standing on those courthouse steps, the first real light I'd seen in years touched my face. It wasn't over. I knew that. But for the first time, the beginning of the end didn't feel like a fall. It felt like a climb. For a brief moment after the hearing, I thought the worst was behind me. The order felt like a shield, cold, official, and solid. But Aaron was not the kind of man who accepted defeat. He didn't rage this time, at least not in public. He switched tactics. 2 weeks later, Melanie called me during lunch. Her tone was clipped, controlled. Julia, I just got a notice. He's filed a police report. I felt my fork freeze midair. For what? For stalking, she said dryly. He claims you planted hidden cameras in the house and are monitoring him remotely. I closed my eyes. You're kidding. I wish I were. A detective called our office this morning. I gave them the court documents, the one that states you're the one living in a hotel. They'll verify and close it, but... She hesitated. He's testing how far he can go. My chest tightened with a mix of disbelief and exhaustion. It's like he's creating his own fiction. That's exactly what he's doing, Melanie replied, and in his mind, he's still the protagonist. She wasn't wrong. That week I found out he'd changed the locks on our house again, our house still under both names. The realtor called her voice apologetic. I tried to schedule another showing, but Mr. Vance refused to let me in. Said the property isn't available right now. That's the 5th one he's canceled, I muttered. I know, she sighed. He's sabotaging the sale. I thanked her and hung up, then stared at the muted TV in the hotel room. The static hum of its silent images felt like company. Every move he made was designed to exhaust me, to drag me into his chaos, to make me look reactive. He couldn't stand that I wasn't engaging. The man who once fed on attention now withered in its absence. But the quiet war still drained me. Every week, another letter from his lawyer arrived. Demands for financial support, accusations of emotional cruelty, requests for temporary reimbursement. Every one of them signed with the same hollow civility. Melanie told me, he's trying to provoke you into a mistake. Don't give him one. So I didn't. But at night, lying in that stiff hotel bed, I sometimes caught myself whispering his name into the dark. Not out of longing, but disbelief. How had I loved someone who weaponized weakness so effectively? 3 months passed before I saw him again. Melanie scheduled a meeting with the mediator to discuss the property sale. He's refusing all offers, she told me. This can't drag on. We'll force mediation. On the morning of the meeting, I dressed carefully. Light gray blouse, black slacks. No jewelry, no perfume, just simplicity armor of another kind. When I arrived, Aaron was already seated at the long, polished table beside his lawyer. His sister Letitia sat in the corner, clutching a tissue dramatically, as though attending a funeral that hadn't happened yet. He looked worse than before. His hair was longer, his shirt collar slightly wrinkled. But his eyes, those eyes still searched for a stage light. The mediator, an older man with thinning hair and the patience of a saint, sighed as we sat. Let's get through this civilly, please. Aaron leaned back in his chair. I'm not signing anything until she pays me what I'm owed. Melanie's brows arched. What you're owed? Yes, he said, his voice rising slightly. I gave up my career to support her work. She owes me for lost income, for emotional distress, for property damage. Melanie cut in smoothly. She slid a stack of invoices across the table. Hotel bills, wall repairs, antique restoration. Aaron's jaw twitched. You're billing me for that radio again. I met his eyes for the first time in months. You broke it, Aaron. It was the only thing my father left me. His face twisted, the charm cracking. You're pathetic, he hissed under his breath. The mediator cleared his throat. Mr. Vance, please keep your comments appropriate. Melanie ignored him and continued. Our client has documentation for every expense. She's also prepared to file a motion for contempt of court if your client continues to obstruct the sale of the marital property. Letitia suddenly burst in. She's trying to make him homeless. The mediator's hand hit the table softly but firmly. Ms. Vance, If you speak again, I'll have to ask you to leave. Aaron's lawyer exhaled heavily. Can we take a short recess? They huddled in whispers at the far end of the room. I caught snippets, anger course, report, judge, and a chill ran down my spine. When they came back, Aaron's expression had shifted. Less rage, more desperation. You'll regret this, he muttered. You think people won't see what you've done. I don't care what people see, I said. My voice was quiet but steady. I care what's real. Melanie leaned in, almost smiling. That's a beautiful closing statement, Julia. By the end of that meeting, Aaron still hadn't signed, but his lawyer's confidence was cracking. The mediator scheduled one final session warning both sides that the court would enforce the sale if no agreement was reached. As we left, Melanie turned to me. He's unraveling. And when control is all a person has, unraveling feels like death. Outside, the sky had turned the color of tin. Wind tugged at my hair as we walked toward the parking lot. He's not going to stop, I said. No, Melanie agreed softly. But you are going to win. That night back in the hotel, I turned off all the lights and lay staring into the dark. The air conditioner hummed like a heartbeat. I thought about the years I spent mistaking volatility for passion, apology, for love, silence, for peace. I wasn't afraid anymore, but I was tired enough to want the war to end no matter what winning looked like. 6 months after I left, I found myself back in another conference room. Same polished table, same fluorescent lights that hum like wasps, same ache behind my eyes that no amount of sleep seems to fix. This time it wasn't a hearing. It was supposed to be closure. Melanie sat beside me, tapping her pen against her legal pad. Across from us, Aaron, his lawyer, and uninvited but tolerated his sister Letitia, pretending to dab her eyes with a tissue that stayed suspiciously dry. Aaron looked hollowed out. His once clean suit hung loosely, his skin a shade too pale, eyes rimmed in red. But even in ruin, he still managed a faint smirk, the kind that said, you might win the battle, but I'll still poison the air you breathe. The mediator entered, setting down his folder. All right, everyone, let's make this the last meeting. Aaron's lawyer began immediately, smooth and rehearsed. My client is the aggrieved party. He's been forced from his home, cut off financially, and left with emotional trauma that has impacted his career. Melanie leaned forward before he could continue. Your client was not forced from his home. He refused to comply with the court's order to sell. He's had 6 months and 11 canceled showings. That's contempt, not trauma. Aaron's jaw tightened. She's selling it out from under me. It's not your house, Aaron, I said quietly. It's ours, and it needs to be sold. He scoffed. You're heartless. I almost smiled. You always mistook boundaries for cruelty. Letitia gasped softly, as if my words had struck her too. I didn't look at her. Melanie opened a file folder, sliding papers toward the mediator. Here's our final proposal sale of the property. At fair market value proceeds, split 50-50. After reimbursement for my client's documented expenses, hotel costs, repairs, legal fees, and restoration of her late father's radio. Aaron's lawyer frowned. Restoration. For what a piece of junk. Melanie's eyes sharpened. A 1940s heirloom. Appraised and verified. Damaged by Mr. Vance. Aaron slammed his palm against the table. You're billing me for that stupid old radio again. Yes, I said simply. Because you broke it. Because you swore you'd replace it and never did. You're unbelievable, he hissed. I leaned back in my chair. You're consistent. The mediator cleared his throat weary. Please. We're here to reach an agreement, not rehash the past. But Aaron wasn't listening anymore. He was staring at the table, muttering to himself. You can't keep doing this to me. You ruin everything, and then pretend to be calm about it. His voice trembled, cracked. You enjoy watching me fall apart. Melanie sighed softly. Your client is welcome to his feelings, she told his lawyer. But we're here for facts, not projections. Letitia suddenly jumped in. She manipulated him. You don't know what she did behind closed doors. The mediator raised a hand. Ms. Vance, one more outburst, and you'll have to leave. Letitia sat back, cheeks flushed. Aaron's lawyer muttered something about unrealistic demands, but Melanie's tone turned sharp. Then we'll go to trial. We'll bring the anger management report, which shows he was 1 session away from expulsion for disruptive behavior. We'll call the realtor to testify that he refused access to the property 11 times. The judge will force the sale anyway after both parties have wasted another $80,000 in fees. The room went utterly still. Aaron blinked, processing. You wouldn't. I met his eyes. I would. He turned to his lawyer, whispering something frantic. His hands trembled. I could see it, the flicker of panic, the tiny collapse of a man realizing his narrative no longer held weight. Finally, the mediator spoke. Mr. Vance, what do you want to do? Aaron looked at me. His face softened for half a second, just enough to remind me of the man I once thought I loved. The man who laughed at midnight movies, who kissed the back of my hand before work, who promised he'd never hurt me. But that man was long gone. I want 70-30, he said weakly. She has more money. Melanie didn't even blink. No, 50-50 after reimbursements. Aaron's lawyer rubbed his forehead. Aaron, he muttered, sign it. I'm not agreeing, Aaron snapped. She owes me. His voice rose, shaking. She owes me for my career, for my reputation, for my life. Melanie's tone dropped to a whisper that somehow carried through the room. You lost those things on your own, Mr. Vance. He stared at me, desperate. Julia, please, we can talk about this privately. We don't have to make it ugly. I shook my head. It's already ugly. You made sure of that. The mediator slid this final document forward. Last chance, Mr. Vance. He looked at it for a long time. Then finally his pen scraped across the page. A shaky, angry signature. The sound of it felt like the closing of a door I'd been afraid to touch for years. When it was over, Aaron sat slumped in his chair, drained. Letitia silently gathered her purse, refusing to meet my eyes. Melanie thanked the mediator, her tone brisk but kind. As we stepped into the hallway, the air felt thin, unreal. I leaned against the cool wall and exhaled for what felt like the first time that year. Melanie smiled faintly. It's done. Is it? I asked. She nodded. Legally, yes. Emotionally, that takes longer. But you're free, Julia. I nodded slowly, the words sinking in like sunlight through water. Free, I whispered. I'd almost forgotten what that felt like. Outside, the wind caught my hair, lifting it slightly, as if something invisible had let go. 6 months later, I woke to sunlight. Real sunlight, not the pale flicker from hotel curtains or courtroom fluorescence, but warm light spilling across my own walls. My apartment was small, quiet, and mine. The first thing I heard was the soft crackle of the radio. The old one, fixed whole again. It sat on a shelf by the window, the wood now restored to its original honey color. The faint hum of music filled the room, not loud, just steady. I'd started keeping it on in the mornings, not because I needed noise, but because I finally got to choose what filled the silence. I made coffee. No arguments about beans, no complaints about timing, no slammed cabinet doors. Just the sound of boiling water and the rhythm of my own breathing. Sometimes I still catch myself expecting Aaron to walk in. The mind clings to patterns even when the heart knows better. But then I look around and realize how different peace feels from pause. Peace doesn't make you hold your breath. I found out through a mutual acquaintance that Aaron and Letitia are living together now in a one-bedroom apartment across town. He works as an administrative assistant at a small art gallery. She still tells anyone who will listen that I ruined her brother's life. When I first heard it, I felt a flicker of something pity, maybe. But not anger. Not anymore. Melanie called last week to confirm that everything was finalized. The sale, proceeds, reimbursements, every last signature. It's all closed, Julia, she said. You did it. I laughed softly. We did it. She chuckled. You know, not everyone manages to leave that kind of chaos standing tall. Most people crawl. I did crawl, I admitted. Just long enough to learn how to walk again. After we hung up, I sat by the window watching the city move below. People carrying bags, coffee cups, groceries, mundane, beautiful things. For the first time in years, the world didn't look like a battlefield. It looked like possibility. I thought about that courtroom, about the version of me who sat there trembling, trying to hold her dignity like a fragile cup of water. I wish I could tell her something now. That she was right to walk away. That quiet doesn't mean weak. That some wars aren't meant to be won, they're meant to be left behind. That night I poured a glass of wine, not to forget, but to celebrate remembering who I am. The radio hummed softly beside me. A slow jazz tune, the kind my father used to whistle when he worked in the garage. I turned the dial, adjusted it until the signal was clear. Then I whispered into the room to no one in particular, "You can't rewrite me." The words lingered in the air, calm and solid. I leaned back on the couch legs tucked beneath me, watching the golden light fade into the soft blue of evening. There were no texts buzzing, no footsteps pacing in the next room, no voice turning love into accusation. Just the faint murmur of the radio, the steady pulse of life moving forward. I smiled, not because I'd won, but because I'd finally stopped losing myself.